common factors in the professional practice of librarianship, where the 10 countries are similar and where the 10 countries differ. So when we're talking about ASEAN, we're talking about the 10 member countries that exist in the network. And at the end of the day, they hope to establish the mutual recognition of professional qualification, and that will finally lead to the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding among participating ASEAN countries on mutual recognition of qualification. So hopefully they hope to sign a resolution and a manifesto of commitment. This was discussed at the last meeting, and they were looking into the implementation of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025. For us who are not familiar, and myself included, is not quite familiar with this. Only when I was given the topic, I started exploring the blueprint. And there are some things that ASEAN as a community hopes to achieve in the blueprint by the year 2025. And then we're also looking at the formulation of ASEAN librarian standards. Should there be one standard for the entire ASEAN network, or should we be applying each of the individual ASEAN member countries' standards? That has to be discussed. And at the end of the day, all this will lead to a bilateral or multilateral arrangement between two countries or among countries, and they are focusing on the library association. So PPM plays a very important role in this in the region through the signing of MOUs. And at the end of the day, the final product would be the establishment of mutual recognition agreement in response to the ASEAN economic integration. What this means is that ASEAN librarians can work in any ASEAN country. Okay. So they hope to have their second conference or meeting in 2021. So let us wait and see what would be the outcome of the second meeting. So the first day they had all the big names within the profession to be talking about the direction they were moving, and on the second day they had representation from the 10 ASEAN countries. I think Prof. Suhaimi represented Malaysia in one of the discussion, and he was talking about library and information science education. Okay. Now, before that, because I'm going backwards here, because all this started at Consul 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So before that, in September 2020, they had a pre-convening session. So before the actual convergence meeting, they had a pre-session where they invited the presidents of the Library Association and senior librarians from ASEAN countries to actually set into focus the objective of the convergence that they were going to have in November. And in the September meeting, they discussed issues and concerns on how to standardize the practice of librarianship in the Southeast Asian countries on competencies, standards of practice, list education, code of ethics, mobility of professionals within ASEAN region, etc. So everything they were discussing about was focusing on libraries and librarianship. And they were also talking about, at that point in time in September, the possibility of signing a number of MMUs between two ASEAN countries, or maybe between a number of ASEAN countries. And all this started at the pre-Consul convening on ASEAN integration cross-border mobility of librarians in June 2015 in Bangkok. So as we all can see, the ball started rolling in June 2015 in Bangkok at Consul. And again, it was organized by the Philippines Librarians Association Incorporated and the Thailand Library Association, because at that point in time, TLA was the host for Consul. And the objectives then was to build a common understanding of the effect of the ASEAN Economic Community for librarianship in ASEAN. So they look at the blueprint and they pick up points, and they try to figure out how libraries and librarians will be affected by the entire AEC blueprint. And at that point in time also, they discuss the possibilities of integration. So what do one need if one wants to practice in ASEAN member states? They look at skills and competencies required of a library professional, and they also look at country restrictions for foreign professionals. And they also hope to strengthen and build a more unified library association willing to share best practices and learning experience. So at the end of the day, what this entire group of people hope to do is that all library associations come together to work in the interest of libraries and librarians and librarianship for the ASEAN region. Okay. And And they also look at the requirements to practice librarianship in selected member states. Yeah, are there barriers? What skills do you need? What competencies do you need? What language barriers do we have to face? And what form of accreditation should be given to the list faculty and students? And finally, they are looking at the big thing that is the MRA, or the mutual recognition arrangements. So what was discussed then was the Council Executive Board members and the Library Association in ASEAN in June 2015 agreed on how to proceed with cross-border mobility. And they were supposed to be preparing draft recommendations on areas of mutual collaboration. And they were supposed to initiate a creation of an ASEAN repository of information for public references, or public reference, focusing on libraries and library association. And that database also should have the skills and qualification required for librarians for each country, and the laws and regulations to practice and work. Okay, so which means that PPM was supposed to also create a database or a repository with these three components within it. Okay, and the push factor for all this was actually the ASEAN Economic Blueprint that was published in 2015, and the target is for 2025. So at this point in time, as mentioned by the acting CEO of Pustaka, 8 priority sectors or 8 professions have been given or have signed or have formalized mutual recognition of education and experiences: architecture, surveying, medical, dental, engineering, nursing, accounting, and tourism. 8 of them. Out of these 8, please bear in mind that 7 are professions that are legalized, which means that they have an act looking after their profession. So probably at the end of this, we have a presenter from AG's Chambers, if I'm not mistaken. We can ask the representative from AG's whether having MRA or signing MOUs with ASEAN member countries could lead to the possibility of librarian being a professional profession with a legislation. Could this be the answer to having an act, a Akta Pustakawan or a Librarians Act for Malaysia? Because when you look at the 8 here, only tourism, I think, if it does not have a legislation legislating it, the rest all has a legislation or an Akta in Malaysia which rules or which governs the performance of the profession itself. So currently all 10 ASEAN member states have agreed to these 8 professionals, and they are looking at the 8 MRAs, and they are constantly updating and looking at how to make it better. And work still remains on defining competency-based qualifications and benchmark. So we really have to look at this profession, get in touch with, for example, the architectural services. We will be looking at PAM, Persatuan Architect Malaysia. For medical, we will be looking at MMA, Malaysian Medical Association. For engineering, probably IEM, Institute Kejuruteraan Malaysia, to see what have they done so far, and maybe we can sort of look at it and compare with what our profession can do if we are to go forward with the MRA. So for those who are interested in looking at the ASEAN Economic Blueprint, it's online. The link is there. Look at it and see what it entails when we are talking about our profession, when we are talking about MRA. Okay. So mutual recognition of professional qualifications for librarians ASEAN, where are we right now? Singapore, any undergraduate degree, MLS, any undergraduate degree, a postgraduate diploma, BLS degree, and they require mandatory apprenticeship or training period. They do not require a license or an examination to practice as a librarian. Philippines, you require a license, yeah, and the license is regulated by PRC and the PRBLFL, which means that to practice as a librarian, you need to sit for an exam and you have to give a license, get a license. Without the license, you cannot be a librarian. In Malaysia, we are similar to Singapore. We do not need a license, or neither do we need an examination. For Thailand, it's similar. Indonesia, they have implemented the Indonesia National Work Competence Standards or Professional Certification Agency for Librarian. And what this entails, if I'm not mistaken, you can read the facts from one of the papers, is that the librarian has to sit for an exam and they will get a certificate stating what are their competencies. At this point in time, it's not compulsory. Okay, they just need to uh, sit for the exam, get certification for their competencies, and then probably use the certification or certificate to get jobs. Yeah, so that the potential employees know what are your competencies. But at this point in time, I was informed by Indonesia that it's not compulsory. Okay. Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, there is no write-up or information coming out from them about this one. So far, there are two papers available. One is written by a Filipino, and they concluded by saying that Filipino librarians would not have any problems working in any ASEAN country. Okay, because they have a license, and their license guarantee that they have the necessary competencies. Zulfikar Zen wrote a paper for Indonesia, and he said that within the Indonesian um, country, they recognize three problems that ASEAN librarians will face: language, culture, and low salary. Yeah, these are the three important things that we need to consider if we were to go into our MRA. Now, what is the role of Persatuan Pustakawan Malaysia? Like I said before, this is just my opinion. Okay, what I perceive the role of PPM to be. So, what is our stand right now? PPM attended the meeting in Bangkok in June 2015. PPM also attended and presented at the meeting in November 2020. However, up to this point in time, there has no statement, no one statement coming from PPM on this matter. Or if there are, I might have missed it, but as far as I have asked around and looked at and sourced at, I cannot find any statement coming from PPM on what is their stand on the MRA, okay, in spite of them having attended two meetings. So at the meeting in the Zoom meeting in November, Malaysia was represented by the then Deputy Director General of PNM, Datin Jamalia, and Prof. Suhaimi talked about list education in Malaysia, and Ms. Siti Sumaizan, the VP1, the Vice President 1 of PPM, talked about public library and school libraries, and also presented a country profile of Library Association in Malaysia. So these three personalities or people were there at the meeting. Now, throwback. Okay, this was what was agreed upon. If you look at all the meeting agendas, we agreed to proceed with cross-border mobility. We agreed to draft recommendation on MRAs, and we agreed to create an ASEAN repository of information on the three components. And in the meeting in September and November, sorry, it should be 2020, we agreed to standardize the practice of librarianship in ASEAN, competencies, standards, etc., etc. So that was what we agreed at the two meetings that was held. Now, what needs to happen for PPM? PPM needs to look back at what we agreed upon, and for a start, create a repository of libraries and library association. There is currently one library association in PPM, but recently there is another association that came up, that is Pertubuhan Guru Perpustakaan dan Media, Pertubuhan GPM. So there is another association to reckon with. So you have got two library associations now there. And probably you might want to have the inclusion of Persatuan Sejarah Lisan Malaysia, because this particular persatuan also includes a lot of librarians, yeah, because libraries are now doing oral history, and a number of librarians are now members of PSLM. And we also need a repository to look at the skills and qualifications required to be a librarian in the public sector, in the private sector. Is it different? Is it so much different to be, for example, a librarian in UM and a librarian in Sunway or in Monash or in Xiamen, for example? And we also need to look at, are there laws regulating the profession? We have a code of ethics in PPM, but to what extent is it being used for the profession? We need to look at it. And the second thing is that PPM needs to study the differences in qualification requirements among ASEAN countries. What does it require if I, a librarian, wants to work in the Philippines? Do I have to take the test? Do I need a license? What qualification do I need to work in Indonesia, in Myanmar, in Vietnam, in Laos, in Cambodia, in Indonesia, in Thailand? And we also need to make a differentiation between the qualification and license. Philippines is very clear. You need a license to practice. Without the license, you cannot practice in the Philippines. So can we Malaysian librarians take the exam and get a license to practice in the Philippines? So these are points to consider. And we also need to study the different models of recognition for the 8 professions. How did the 8 professions got recognized? They have some form of a model that they use, and if you go through the readings of Hamanaka and Suhaimi Juso, there are 3 models, yeah, and Hamanaka and Suhaimi Juso applied the 3rd model for the engineering profession. And also we need to conduct a study on the ASEAN MRAs for the least profession. Please take a look at the paper written by Hamanaka and Suhaimi Juso. It's in my reference list. They did a study on the engineering profession and they fitted it to a model, and they came up with a model of how the engineering profession in Malaysia can jive with the engineering profession in the other 9 ASEAN states. So this is a very good paper to look at because they recommended 3 models and they went on to the 3rd model, the hub and spoke model. Okay. And we also need to look at, PPM also need to look at the EU, the TTMRA and the North NAFTA. In NAFTA, there is a MRA that allows Canadian librarians to practice in the United States of America and librarians in the United States of America to practice in Canada. So they already have that in place. So probably we need to look at how it's done, the wording of the MRA, and come up with one for Malaysia. Now, in conclusion, okay, the ball is in our park now. After 3 meetings, one was in 2015, and after a lapse of 6 years, or rather a lapse of 5 years, there was a meeting in 2020, and now there's going to be another meeting in 2021. So what do we do? Okay, I would recommend that all those involved has to come together, which means that it has to be PPM as the initiator, because throughout the conversation, we saw that the force that binds everything together is the Library Association. So in our instance, it has to be PM. PPM has to work out with the junior and senior librarians, the practicing librarians. They have to sit together with the library schools. They have to sit together with PNM, the National Library. They have to sit together with JPA, the body that governs our profession. They also need to sit down with the people from the AG's chambers, the Attorney General's chamber. And we also need to sit with the ASEAN Secretariat to figure out what this is all about. Because at the end of the day, we do not want to be left behind at whatever is happening elsewhere. At this point in time, I think the Philippines Library Association has signed an MOU with Myanmar and with Thailand, looking at recognizing qualifications and standardizing their curriculum, library science curriculum. So we have to make a decision are we in or are we out? So if we are in, what do we have to do? Or if we want to be in, what do we have to do? Or if we want to opt out of the entire agreement, then we have to give our reasons for it. We just cannot keep quiet anymore. But the main question that comes to mind is, are our librarians ready? Okay. Do we have, or are our librarians competent? Do they have enough competencies? Again, I come back to the point that Philippines has an exam. So are our people prepared to sit for the exam if it is a requirement for them to be librarians in the Philippines? And do we have enough knowledge? Has the library schools in Malaysia imparted enough knowledge for our graduates to actually work in a foreign country? So then again, library schools need to look at the curriculum again. Probably it will be discussed by Associate Professor Dr. Wan on this issue, as I discussed with him earlier on. Some of you guys might have heard our conversation. Then we are also looking at the mindset of our librarians. Are our librarians ready to work in another country? Okay. There will be issues about families, about husband, about children, and there will be issues about, like raised by Zen. He talked about language. Are you ready to work in a country where English is not the main language? And then they have to look at the culture. There will be a lot of cultural differences. Yeah, are we ready to adapt to the cultural differences? And we are also talking about salary. Probably in our country, you are paid a certain amount of salary, but when you go to another country, your salary can be higher, which is good, or it can be lower. So are our librarians, their mindset prepared for it? And if they are, how many of them are willing to go? That is another thing. And we also need to look at the pros and cons of it. I see the main pro as, or the main advantage as being, you would have tremendous transfer of knowledge and expertise. A Malaysian librarian working in Singapore, working in the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, you will bring with you a lot of knowledge, skills, and there can be exchange of knowledge and skills. And you will also have a cultural experience. Yeah, you will be able to forge relationships, establish networks when you come back. So there are the advantages, but there are also the cons or the disadvantages. Are the other librarians from other ASEAN countries going to be our competitor? In a job market that is small or shrinking, do we have enough jobs to actually sustain the influx of uh, ASEAN librarians? As an employer, who would you employ? Would you employ a Malaysian librarian, or would you employ a librarian from another country? Okay, so that's things that we are consider. There would be competition. There would definitely be competition. So at this point, we have to make decisions, and it's not easy decisions. It has to be thought out. It cannot be done in a year. It has really need to be discussed, and decided. At the end of the day, we want a situation whereby we have a win-win situation. So that begs the question: what is the role of PPM at this point in time? I think PPM should act as the center point, or the tripod for all the other agencies around to collaborate. So you get PNM, you get your senior and junior practicing librarians, you get the academics from these schools, you get people from the AG's chamber, you get people from the ASEAN Secretariat to actually sit down and discuss the pros, the cons, the advantages, the disadvantages, the process. But please bear in mind, it has to be a win-win situation, and please bear in mind that we have to make the decision. We cannot be sitting on the fence and not deciding. If we say yes, go in it, full-fledged, head on, or if we want to get out of it, or we do not want to be in it, please tell them why. Yeah, but our reasons have to be valid, because we are talking about global. We are talking about borderless countries. Okay, even now as we are speaking, we can still connect with each other through the web. So I have a list of references at the back. For those who wants to explore, this is a very interesting topic for presentation at seminars and conferences, or even for writing papers in a journal, because this is something new that we are coming into, and there would be challenges. Okay, so there are about 10 references that you can look at. Okay, so that is the gist of my presentation, and ask questions if you want to. You can connect with me, and I will try my best to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noor Ezan Cik Nasir, for your presentations and the sharing on mutual recognition of professional qualification for librarians in ASEAN, role of Persatuan Pustakawan Malaysia. Okay, we go ahead and take some time for questions. Okay, I think there's no questions. I've checked also on Facebook and also YouTube, and on the chat section also we don't have any questions for now. And just a reminder, if you have any question, ladies and gentlemen, during the presentations, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. And for the viewers on the Facebook and YouTube, you can write down the questions on the chat sections. The speaker will then either answer your questions live or in the chat sections. It's like we don't have any questions. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a break and we'll be back for our next paper and speaker after this advertisement. See you later.
Hai semua, hari ini saya akan berkongsi tentang cara mendaftar pembelajaran leadership dan langkah menyertai modul pembelajaran. Untuk langkah pertama, buka enjin carian seperti Google dan type Open Learning Reading Sheet. Kemudian, klik pada pautan paling atas. Selepas itu, klik pada butang Join Now. Langkah kedua. Di sini, anda akan diberi pilihan sama ada menggunakan Microsoft, Facebook atau akaun email. Tapi sebaiknya saya sarankan anda untuk menggunakan akaun email. Langkah ketiga, anda diminta untuk mengisi butiran lengkap sebelum memulakan modul pembelajaran. Pembelajaran ini mengandungi 12 modul. Setiap modul haruslah dilengkapkan dan anda juga harus membuka setiap audio yang disertakan dalam modul. Selepas habis setiap modul, anda dikehendaki untuk memberi komen. Untuk langkah keempat, setelah selesai semua modul pembelajaran, anda dikehendaki untuk mengisi maklumat penilaian. Akhir sekali, anda akan memperolehi e-sijil setelah selesai semua modul pembelajaran. Kiranya anda mempunyai anak berumur 3 tahun ke bawah, anda boleh menuntut Kids Reading Sheet di mana-mana cawangan pustaka yang berdekatan. Anda dikehendaki untuk membawa sijil dan buku rekod kesihatan anak untuk tuntutan. Selamat mencoba!
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Okay. Okay, Dr. Noizan, it looks like we have a question from, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Diljit Singh on the Q&A section. Okay, the good presentation now, Dr. Noizan. One fundamental question. The question from Dr. Diljit Singh, what is the problem we are trying to address? And what is the need for an MRA apart from the push by the Philippines?
This is a personal opinion. Thank you, Dr. Digit, for listening in. This is my personal take on the whole thing. Actually, as far as I'm concerned, there's no actual problem to address. It's just that there has been a push from certain ASEAN countries to allow their librarians to actually come to other ASEAN countries to work. And if you look at the AEC blueprint, somewhere in there it does say that ASEAN countries should be sharing their workforce, should be sharing their professional workforce, which can lead to the transfer of knowledge, transfer of expertise, transfer of skills, transfer of IT, cultural experience, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, it talks about sharing knowledge and skills amongst the ASEAN nation. So that is why I was saying whether do we want to be part of this or not? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? We really, really need to study and not jump into it headlong by saying yes or no. So probably in Malaysia, I do not know, correct me if I'm wrong, we might have a supply of librarians, an oversupply of librarians. We do not have enough libraries, enough jobs for these people to come in. So are we ready to open our gates to librarians from other ASEAN countries? Would that be a problem? I would foresee that as a problem because you have competition within the profession. But at the same time, in the spirit of ASEAN, um, should we be opening our gates? Should we be complying? Should we be agreeing? And also think about it, there might be other professions that they actually can share their expertise where there is a demand for their presence in the various other ASEAN countries. Yeah. So whoever is going to take the lead, which I think PPM will be the one, please look at it and think rationally about it. Yes, we have to address the spirit of ASEAN, the spirit of sharing, but we also need to consider the welfare and the lives of our librarians in Malaysia itself. Are they ready for the competition or can they compete? Or is there an opportunity for when they go out of the country, will there be a good job opportunities for them? So like I said, we have to reach a win-win situation at the end of the day. Thanks, Dr. Digit.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Noizan, for the answer. I hope it's answering the question by Dr. Digit. Okay, let's move to our second speaker, that is Associate Professor Dr. Wan Abdul Kadir Wandola. Okay, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Abdul Kadir Wandola holds a Bachelor of Arts Honorable from University of Malaya, Postgraduate Diploma in Library Science, University Technology Mara, Malaysia, Master in Librarianship, University of Wales at Aberystwyth, and then Philosophy Doctor in Information Services from University of Malaya. Okay, he is a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Information Management, University Technology Mara, Malaysia. He has served as a program coordinator, head of study center, and deputy dean student affairs. He teaches in the areas of digital libraries and multimedia applications, information sources and services in social sciences, information management in organization and publishing and publications of information materials. Prior to teaching, he worked as a librarian and bibliographic documentation and publication officers in University of Malaya and National Library of Malaysia for 10 years. He was a research associate in the Department of Library Science, Faculty of Computer Science and Information Technologies, University of Malaya, June 2017 until March 2018. Without further ado, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Wan Abdul Kadir Wandola to present a paper on mutual recognition of professional qualification for librarians in ASEAN, role of UITM, and this paper was co-written by Professor Professional Technologist Dr. Suhaimi Zakaria. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Mr. Farhan Aini, as our moderator today. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Tuan Haji Jafri Bujang Masli, the chairman of PPM Sarawak chapter, Madam Arfah Adnan, acting CEO of Sarawak State Library, presenters, Dr. Nur Ezan, Madam Wadrina, and also Madam Nozilati, distinguished guests, organizing committee of the 5th Sarawak Annual Librarian Colloquium, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you very much to the organizing committee of this colloquium for inviting us to participate and also to share knowledge in this very interesting colloquium, yearly colloquium. And for this year, the theme of this colloquium is mutual recognition of professional qualifications for librarian in ASEAN. I'm very happy to see you all today. Okay, can you see my slide? Let me begin with showing to you my first slide. Okay, the title of my presentation today is Mutual Recognition of Professional Qualifications for Librarians. And definitely I will stress on the roles of University Technology Mra UiTM. We are very sorry for Prof. Saimi for not attending this for not giving this presentation because of the very important commitment in the faculty. This is the outline of my presentation. As introduction, I would like to refresh our mind about the library development in Malaysia, that no one can imagine that there are so many changes that have taken place since the era of the barefoot librarian during the 1970s to the present day of cybrarian and wireless library, data librarian, and digital library. The term, I use the term of barefoot librarian. It doesn't mean that during that time they are not wearing shoes and socks, but I mean here that there were no such a sophisticated facilities like we have today. Not only the number and type of libraries increase nowadays, but also the characteristics and function of libraries, and also in terms of professional who manage the library also has changed. Okay, libraries and information centers nowadays are the characteristics of a developed nation. We are very proud in this profession that when the one new building is built, then there will be most likely there will be library. There will be library situated or allocated for it. Actually, mutual recognition of professional qualification for librarians have been discussed lately through IFLA, International Federation of Library Association and institutions. I will touch on that later. This mutual recognition concept, I think, came from the IFLA initiative. IFLA initiative, and it's very clear, highlighted by Dr. Izan just now. I'm very impressed. I'm very happy with Dr. Izan's presentation just now, that she has enlightened me actually pertaining to the issue, because I'm not very clear also about the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. I'm clear about the concept of the mutual recognition for professional qualifications that allow people with professional qualifications obtained in one country to have these qualifications recognized in other country. I can understand that, but in detail, it's the clarification from the right person today gives me happiness actually. The other issue is internationalization. Yeah? Also has gained traction, promoting intercultural collaboration and also understanding has gained great opportunities for the Faculty of Information Management, University Technology Mra, to move forward, to be in the competition, in order to be in the high ranking of the library education in Malaysia. The global marketplace of librarianship activities actually is a reality. Marketplace here does not mean the commercial dealings. It is not the commercial dealings like other profession of architecture and so on. What I mean here is that for certain important posts, especially in major university libraries and also other major libraries in Malaysia, I think the competition for the highest post in the library became very interesting, I think, because it really requires the mutual recognition, because sometimes the university library, let's say, they need the professional from the other country, the outstanding librarian maybe, or at least from the other organizations. However, the library education and qualifications in Malaysia, but in particular, and also the other countries, are within their national boundaries. They cannot go further. But I found that since IFLA and PPM have been working very hard, they work very hard to investigate, to research, to have seminars, and find ways whereby the professional qualification in one country should be recognized actually in the other country, because we are moving forward. We have to move forward for mutual recognition. Okay, as a reflection for this in this seminar also, I would like to highlight and appreciate the contribution of our librarianship profession. A majority of you here are professional librarians, and some of you here also are the graduates from Faculty of Information Management, UITM. I'm very happy to announce to you that up to date, our graduate, since the first the establishment in 1968, the total graduates of our faculty now is more than 21,000, which include the diploma level, the qualification of SPM, the diploma level, first degree level, master's level, and PhD. This figure is before 2000, 21,000 already, working in various sectors, and many of them have retired. Okay. Librarianship as a profession. As we all know that we are professional, because a professional qualification is a qualification designed to train students to meet particular standards in practice for a particular profession. it gives a certain expertise in this profession, that if we study librarianship, so we are called professional because we have followed these 6 characteristics or features given by Gardner 2005. The first characteristic is commitment to serve the interest of client. Sure, we are working to serve them depending on what kind of libraries we are in. A body of theory of special knowledge that we gain from our formal professional education in various institutions, including UITM. Specialized set of professional skills, practices, and performance unique to the profession. Okay, as we all know, every curriculum design will stress on 3H. 3H. The first H is head, which includes knowledge, knowledge and theories in that particular field. The second H is hand, which mean skills that we get from our formal study. And the third H is a heart. We also should consider on the attitude, on our attitude, moral and so on. Capacity to render judgments with integrity. Okay, we throughout our profession we have to make decisions. Let's say so we have to make judgment with integrity. Organized approach to learning from experience. Okay. We have to move forward. We have to we have opportunity to have continuing professional education to remove the gap between the first or the professional qualification that we get to the industrial needs. Let's say we cannot achieve what industry needs with us, so we can approach to further up our skills and learning. That's why some of the librarians, I think we need to have a continuing professional education. Later on, after few years they have worked as the librarian. Development of professional community, for sure. I appreciate the contribution of PPM and also IFLA. I see that these two professional associations are very important in enhancing our professionalism. Okay, mutual recognition, as has been discussed, that we need our qualification being recognized in other countries. Other countries' qualification also we can recognize. That is the concept of mutual recognition actually, for professional qualification. Actually, it happens not only in librarianship, in other area of professional also. They are working. Some of them have successfully been active. Okay, talking about professional recognition is not clear if we don't discuss about the IFLA contribution or program that has been conducted. As we know, that there is one special project done by IFLA, Building Strong Library Association Program, or BISLA. They are supporting the projects including in Asia. They started this project actually in 2014. And then I would also mention here Building Strong Library and Information Science Education, BSLISE. Maybe it has been clarified also by Dr. Izan just now. And I think mutual recognition of our professional qualification also is related to IFLA strategy also. And the other one that came across my literature review is Asian integration, cross-border mobility of librarians. So these are the IFLA strategy. Maybe one of the strategies I think is related to mutual recognition. Okay, Asian for the border, for this Asian integration, cross-border mobility for librarians. Actually, it was based on the pre-consul meeting by Philippines Librarians Association. We was very active. And also Thailand Library Association organized the convening prior to the consul in Bangkok. And from there, they have created a platform for common understanding of ASEAN economics and social cultural communities and cross-border mobility among leaders of library profession in the 10 ASEAN countries. Library associations have important role in this process. Actually, they have contact with labor and also education ministries responsible for implementing cross-border mobility programs. Okay. This is actually the one of the I took this information from one of the papers presented during this meeting, given by actually PPM, according to my literature by PPM, that these are the earlier, I think the first papers presented from our country, stating about the requirement to practice the profession. Am I correct, Dr. Izan? I hope it is true that it is came from PPM. That the requirements for government sector, okay, it's very clear that we need a bachelor's degree in information science, we have or basic degree and postgraduate diploma in library science, and then the degree in library science and information. And for government sector, the candidate have to pass in Malay language. Okay. But for the private sectors and other and universities and institutions of higher learning, they may be different, a little bit different in terms of requirement. Because according to here, Bachelor of Information Science plus Master of Library and Information Science or Master of Library and Information Science from UIAM and also University Maya. Okay, but for private sector, I think maybe a lower qualification. They can accept to work at their place. And then we can see also in terms of country restriction for foreign professionals. In the government sector, must pass English language and also have a valid working permit. So I think it is tallied that this is the restriction of a country that the professional from the other country have to follow. Okay. This is the name of the post of the librarian, existing library and job titles, just for our information. Okay, and it's important also to know the skills and competencies required of a library professionals. Okay, this one given by the Malaysian representative lah, in terms of this meeting. Okay. Okay, but the main purpose of my paper today is to discuss on the roles of UITM, the role of particularly Faculty of Information Management, UITM, in this issue, in mutual recognition of professional qualification for librarians. As we all know, that our faculty is the first faculty, is the first faculty established in Malaysia. Our vision is to be the world-class center of excellence for education and research in the fields of library and information management. The faculty is committed to provide education for information professionals to enable well-balanced, knowledgeable, competitive, and ethical workforce towards the development of Malaysia as a knowledge society, to provide continuous education programs at various levels, provide leadership in consultancy services for individual organizations interested in research and development in the areas. And then the faculty actually will ensure that the above will be achieved through quality curriculum and syllabus that have been verified, accepted, and recognized nationally and even internationally. As we all know that the universities or faculties are required to upgrade or their curriculum within 5 years. In 5 years' time, they have to develop the new curriculum because to fulfill the industrial needs because also because the change of technologies that is happening around us. So faculty have to change their curriculum, and also the faculty need to go through various processes, including the approval from the MQA in the education ministry. Okay, a little bit history. We established in 1968 a full-time program in librarianship based on the curriculum of the Library Association UK to produce professional librarian. In 1971, the School of Library Science was established in UITM that time, before 1999. In 1972, we implemented 2 full-time academic programs in librarianship based on ITM's own curriculum. Only in 1972, based on our own curriculum. That was a diploma in library science. It is equivalent to general degree. The qualification was HSC or STPM. Equivalent to general degree, same as law degree, diploma in law and diploma in mass communication. The other one is postgraduate diploma in library science. This one for postgraduate, that like what I took in 1986, postgraduate diploma in library science. Okay, later on, in 1993, actually later on, this diploma in library science has been transferred to advanced diploma in library science in 1993, which was equivalent to honors degree. Yeah, honors degree. The expansion of the program started in 1997, where we have 4 specialization from library science, yeah, library and information management, to information system management, yeah, and then records. We have another new program of record management, and the other one, resource center management. Okay, during this time, actually, our students were, I think, so many students at this time because of this 4 specialization. Okay. In 1997 also, we started the program Diploma in Information Management and also PhD program in Information Management. Diploma in Information Management, the student received the student from SPM, SPM level, who studied for 3 years to get diploma, and then they became the feeder, actually, the feeder to the degree programs in the faculty. For your information, we started the Masters of Knowledge Management and Master of Science, Master of Library Science program in 2003. Yeah, but before that, our first master program in the faculty was Master of Science in Information Management. Yeah, Masters of Science in Information Management. For your information, we have been to Sarawak, Sarawak Library actually in early 2000. Myself, Professor Dato Raja Abdullah, Dr. Laili, and so on, have always been to Sarawak State Library to conduct the Masters of Science in Information Management program by using flexible learning program method. Yeah? Almost every semester we came to Sarawak, but only until the end of 2000. Yeah? After that, we only conducted the flexible learning program in the Faculty of Information Management in Puncak Perdana. Okay, the challenges. I think it is not too late for me to discuss a little bit challenges and problems pertaining to the Asean framework that has been discussed. And also, I think this can clarify what Dr. Digit has asked just now about the curriculum that is going to be developed by the curriculum developer of the programs that are going to be recognized. That if for Asian, we should consider on the Asian framework. We must work out on Asian framework to include certain aspects of our Southeast Asian studies aspect, for instance, that should be considered, because we need to consider on the culture and socio-economic aspect in one country. Yeah? And for us, for sure, we would suggest on certain subjects of Asian studies. We also need to find commonalities and interests of every nation should be considered. Any sensitive issues pertaining to the culture, pertaining to the social and economics should be considered. Recommendation to bridge the gaps. If there are gaps between the countries, we should move it. And also pertaining to the later strengths in library and information management, for certain subjects, certain ICT subjects, consideration about iSchools application that we should consider. I think it's very good actually to combine all this consideration, the new things, new aspects, new technology application to be put together to bridge the gaps now. A good ecosystem should be considered. For sure, the ecosystem of, let's say, program of training, twinning program, training, the mutual, the cross border that have been implemented. And I think this one is also related to SDG number 17. Yeah? SDG 17 to partnership. We have actually, I think Sarawak Public Library also is not left behind pertaining to building a good ecosystem and also partnership with the other organizations, particularly overseas. Encourage exchange programs like in our faculty. That we have the exchange program of students and also lecturers. We have chosen the Asian countries like Indonesia. We have done in Indonesia. Right now, every semester, their students are coming here. Their students and also lecturers. And then mutual. After that, we will send it to the other country. I also involved in the exchange program. I went to, I brought 4 students, lecturers, 2 lecturers and 4 students to University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, for 2 weeks. We have been there for 2 weeks. So by that way, we can know about the other countries' syllabus, what they are implementing in terms of student industrial training, in terms of student activities, and so on. So we have to encourage this kind of program. Okay, as additional information for me pertaining to library science education in Malaysia. Beside UITM, we have other 3 universities that are offering a range of courses, especially postgraduate and doctoral programs now. For diploma and undergraduate, it's actually are offered in Faculty of Information Management, UITM only. So these are all the courses offered. Okay, this is the other in UM. Okay, for your information also, in UKM, we have a very nice program and building here. They are offering Masters in Information Science, Doctor of Philosophy, and in Kuliah of ICT, IIUM, we have postgraduate programs, Master in Library and Information Science, and also Doctor of Philosophy in Information Management. So in developing our curriculum, actually, we are stressing on the competencies, the competencies of librarian. Okay. For your information, that there are subjects, there are new subjects actually been included in our new curriculum. For example, data management system or data science, library analytics and metrics. Now we have metadata. We have project management for information professionals. Besides the other courses that can fulfill the competencies for librarian. So we have to make sure that these competencies are included in the new curriculum. And then I think it is parallel to the new curriculum, the curriculum that are going to be developed for mutual recognition of professional qualification. I think also need to consider the new skills, the new skills that need to be embedded, I think, in the curriculum. So I'm not going to touch about these competencies because this is quite detailed. You can see in the literature approaches for competencies. Okay, this is the professional competencies that we need to have. It is a basic thing that we need to have in our curriculum. Managing information resources, information organization, managing information services, applying information tools and technologies. And then in terms of personal competencies, okay, core competencies. Okay, we glance through very fast on this. Okay, actually they are challenging, challenging traditional rules. Okay, these are the, I think, new competencies for librarian. And then this is the challenges. These are the issues and challenges that we are facing in developing the new curriculum. We have to make sure on the quality assurance of library and information science. I think we have to follow, really follow this quality assurance. We have the publication pertaining to this quality assurance that we have to really follow. Industrial Revolution 4.0 also is the other main thing that we have to follow, including this Internet of Things, cross-border mobility for librarians, a regional framework of library and information science education standards, and also building a platform for stronger collaboration among ASEAN LIS schools. Okay, as a conclusion, there are lots of challenges towards mutual recognition of professional qualifications for librarian, LIS students and information professionals recognize and embrace the expanding nature of the field and the challenges facing them. Although the core of the profession remains the same, the methods and tools for information delivery and the scope of the enterprise continue to grow and change dramatically. UITM can be an active player working with other local LIS schools to create a better identity for the profession, embracing concepts of data science, digital humanities, and humanizing technologies. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Abdul Kadir Wandola, and the co-writer, Professor Professional Technologies, Dr. Sohaimi Zakaria, for the presentation and the sharing on mutual recognition of professional qualification for librarians in ASEAN role of University Technology Mra. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take some time for the question now. Okay, Prof, we got a question on the Q&A. Okay, maybe Professor can type down the answer on the chat section because we are short of time. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a break and we'll be back for our next paper and speaker after this advertisement. See you later. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back, and that was Book Bear, one of the services that we offered in Pustaka Negeri Sarawak. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to our third speaker, Mrs. Wan Wadrina Wan Abdul Wahab. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Wadrina joined the Administrative and Diplomatic Services in July 2003 and was posted to the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI, and she is currently the Director, International Relations of the ASEAN Economic Integration Division, MITI. Throughout her career, she has served in the Multilateral Policy and Negotiation Division, Services Sector Development Divisions, and Strategic Negotiation Divisions. Mrs. Wadrina also served at the MITI Geneva as Economic Counselor from 2007 until 2010. Mrs. Wadrina holds a Certificate of Legal Practice, CLP, from University of Malaya and LLB, Legal Baccalaureate, or as we known as a Bachelor of Laws, from the Liverpool University, Liverpool, United Kingdom. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mrs. Wan Wadrina Wan Abdul Wahab to present a paper about a short story on ASEAN. Over to you, Mrs. Wan Wadrina.
Okay, a very good morning, Farhan, and to all my fellow speakers, panelists, as well as the viewers here for listening. First of all, thank you for inviting MITI, for giving us this opportunity. To be honest, this is actually the first time I'm speaking to a bunch of librarians, and it was pretty interesting from all of the presentations this morning. And it's also at the same time information worthy. And I think for the interest of time, I'll also just point out to the salient points in my presentation. So if we could, the slides, please. Okay, so we'll go to the first, maybe we can go to the body of the slide. So this is basically the contents of my presentation. So I think we can go next, please. Next, please. Okay, first of all, as you all know, we have been a member of ASEAN. In fact, we are the founding member of ASEAN since 1967. And how we have evolved, we have three pillars actually. Later on, there's a specific slide that will actually demonstrate to you the three different pillars under ASEAN. But basically from MITI's perspective, we are the custodian for the economic pillar. So basically we look into trade matters. So anything that's related to trade and economics, MITI will actually be the lead either negotiator or the head of delegation. Next, please. Sorry, next slide, please. So this is just to give you a glimpse of our offices around the world. And these offices include our agencies. We have Matrade and MIDA. Matrade doing export promotion and MIDA does investment. Next, please. Okay, this is just to give a snapshot of what ASEAN is. So as you can see, we have more than 600 over million population. It's a very big population, and the youth accounts for nearly 25%. So it's a growing population, and also if you could see the GDP growth is also at 5.2%. So that means there's a lot of potential within ASEAN. Next, please. Okay, next. Okay, this is just to give you an idea of how ASEAN works with some other countries. And if you can see how important ASEAN is to Malaysia, because our major trading partners are actually from the 9 ASEAN countries, which account for nearly 22%, followed by China, US, and then European Union. And even when you talk about in terms of investment, US remains our largest investor. And then secondly, it's ASEAN. So these countries are very important to Malaysia. So whether we like it or not, these are the factual situation we are with ASEAN. Next, please. Okay, so this is very important. Under ASEAN, we have three pillars. So you have the political security that looks after security and political issues, like for example, the Rohingya case, even on sanctions with Iran, etc. So that would fall under the political security, which is headed by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And for MITI, the one that's in yellow, this is what we are actually tasked to look after. This is the custodian that we are. And lastly, also one of the most important one is the social cultural. So this is where actually the librarians fall into. It's actually the third pillar, the social cultural pillar. So this is where MOTAC is actually the custodian. Next, please. So basically, in short, the ACC, they have about 7-8 elements. And I think for librarians, they would fall under the culture and information. So under the ASCC, they also have their own roadmap, work in progress, that they would also have to cross-check with the SDG. Next slide, please. So this is where currently where the social cultural pillar is. And this is the work that they're working into. So whatever they have in their own blueprint, this is where they would actually have to match it with also the aspirations of the SDG. So the areas of cooperation is all listed there. And if you can see, there's information, data quality, etc. So these things are relevant to our librarians as well as librarians across ASEAN. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is just to give you a flavor of where or how we started the economic pillar. So basically, we had our first ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting in 1975. So over the years, we have evolved. We started with goods, trading goods, the liberalization of goods, and then we moved on to services, which is 1995. Okay, next, please. Followed by that, we had the ASEAN Investment Agreement, the AEC Blueprint 2015, and then also we have our ASEAN Trading Goods Agreement, which talks about full liberalization by all ASEAN countries. And now we have our current roadmap or blueprint, which is the AEC Blueprint 2025. Next, please. So basically, for ASEAN, we always work by a roadmap or a blueprint. So it is about 10 years. So the last one had actually lapsed in 2020. So now we're looking into the AEC 2025. So when it reaches 2025, we hope that whatever is stated in the yellow book that's on the screen there, we hope that we actually achieve all of those KPIs. Because if you look from where we started from 2015 and 2015, and then the new one, 2025, we have always worked progressively towards liberalization, towards cohesive integration, because I think ASEAN is very important. As I mentioned earlier in the slide that you saw, we have about 600 over million people population. And if you were to compare the population with Malaysia with the other countries, like for example, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, their population is 3 or 5 times greater than us. So you see, we have a very small market base. And for us being a trading nation, we need to do a lot of exports. So that's why under these blueprints, we try to actually facilitate trade. Trade can be in the form of professionals or highly skilled people, trade, investment, services, etc. So this book is actually publicly available. You can actually go to ASEAN's website and you can download it. We're currently in our midterm review of our AEC 2025. So under the midterm review, we've got about 12 recommendations to see how we could fully implement the aspirations and also the KPIs set out in the AEC 2025. Next slide, please. So this is just a flavor of what is actually inside the AEC Blueprint 2025. So this is all related actually to trade. And but to be honest, the AEC Blueprint is actually horizontal. It actually cuts across all 3 pillars. So it cuts also on social, cultural, as well as political. But what we have here on screen, especially the one in blue, that's all related to trade, the economic pillar. And these are the areas where we are now focusing due to the effects of the COVID pandemic. Okay, next, please. Okay, as you can see, we're now talking about sustainable development. And this year, Brunei is chair. So Brunei has come up with a few interesting ideas. One of them is to come up with a circular economy within ASEAN. So we're working on a definition. We're also looking towards blue economy, in which we're also trying to find a common definition for ASEAN. And I think likewise, in some of the, in the previous speaker, also on the Industrial Revolution 4.0, it's not only Malaysia that being affected, but also the whole region. So this is where ASEAN is also trying to see how ASEAN can capitalize actually on the Industrial Revolution 4.0. And another thing is about connectivity. Connectivity is important because, you know, especially when we have the COVID pandemic, a lot of countries sought to close their borders. And when you close your borders, it's difficult to do trade. So here is where we try to actually seek ways, you know, to enhance actually trade and to ensure that, you know, our export and import is not affected. And of course, the most important thing is the digital economy. As we can see, I think COVID has proven how important actually internet is and how we actually connect the world through digital means. So these are areas that currently are the focus of the ASEAN under the economic pillar. Next, please. So, okay, when the pandemic started last year, I think our ASEAN ministers, including our leaders, they were quick to respond. So we came up with a ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. So basically this framework is actually to address all of the effects of the COVID. It is to help recover as well as to build resilience within the region. Because from the COVID pandemic experience, it has showed us that, you know, it has affected our trade, it had affected lives as well as jobs. So we came together to come up with this plan. And currently we are now in its implementation stage where we have a few initiatives that we hope that we could actually implement this year. Next, please. So this is just the chronology of events that we've done with regards to the ACRF. And as you can see, we've also have other joint initiatives with other countries like Japan, China, Korea. And these are initiatives that are currently ongoing. So we're looking towards working with other countries as well, apart from ASEAN, to make our economy more resilient, as well as to expedite the recovery due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, please. So, okay, basically, this slide actually provides the objective. And as you can see, this is where we are actually trying to work with other countries as well to strengthen the community, the ASEAN community, as well as for resilience against any other future shocks or emergencies. Next slide, please. Okay, this one just provides the broad strategies that we have in the ACRF. So for us, for under the economic pillar, number 3 is the most important. That is the intra-ASEAN market, because this falls under our pillar. So this is where we are trying to actually see how we could actually ensure that trade is seamless between ASEAN. Because currently, if you were to look at the figures, even though we've been established since 1967, we're quite matured, but our inter-regional trade is actually quite low in comparison to countries like EU, where EU is nearly 80%. For ASEAN, I think our intra-ASEAN trade remains it's a quite humble figure. I think it's less than 40%. So there's a lot of potential here. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just to inform you of the initiatives due to the COVID that we're now currently looking at. And I think this is one of, in a slide we actually said these are one of the lemons that we are facing. So we're trying to capitalize on, you know, this 4IR initiatives. And even in ASEAN, we're trying to come up with a regional strategic comprehensive plan to ensure that all of us would be able to actually capitalize on the benefits that would be offered under the 4IR. Next slide, please. So, okay, like I said, these are the lemons. I don't like to use the word challenge because it depends. Life is always either you look at the glass half empty or half full. So for us, of course, financial, I think in any, for any block, for any regional block, it's always a challenge. And of course, because of technology, you have the 4IR coming in. So these are things that, you know, that ASEAN is facing, and we're trying to actually collectively, you know, have shared responsibility towards seeing how we could actually reduce all of these lemons actually in AEC. So next slide, please. Okay, with all the lemons we've collected, of course, you can always make lemonade. And here in this snapshot slide here, for us, it is important that ASEAN, we have this, like I mentioned earlier, because we have a small population, which is only now 32. So, and with ASEAN together, you have 649. So the population is really huge, potential is really huge. So there's vast opportunity. So it's up to us how we want to respond to it. And as I mentioned to you, that Malaysia's global trade with ASEAN is also quite huge. It's nearly 28%. So that's why focus has to be with ASEAN. And not only that, I think what we do also is complementary, even though despite the language, the cultural barriers, but you know, after having been together since 1967, I think those are things that we can actually work towards, you know, improving better. So next slide, please. Okay, next. So this is just to show within ASEAN, Malaysia and ASEAN, we don't only have discussions or meetings with the 9 other countries, but we also have what is known as strategic partners. And they're actually divided into 3 categories. We have dialogue partners, sectoral dialogue partners, and development partners. So what is the difference? So in terms of hierarchy, a country, a non-ASEAN country, if you're categorized as a dialogue partner, that means you have the highest ranking. So this is where you can do a lot of initiatives, you can have free trade agreements, etc. But if you're limited to sectoral dialogue partners, it's only merely cooperation, and likewise together with development partners as well. So development partners, normally we only ask for technical assistance. So this is, I think this is the lowest among the 3 categories, but nevertheless, we have been getting a lot of requests from a lot of countries around the world to become ASEAN partners. So you can see how important ASEAN is growing by the day. Okay, next slide, please. So this is to show all of you here, because we also embark on free trade agreements. Now, free trade agreements are important because ever since the WTO, the World Trade Organization, has been in impasse since 2008, negotiations have been stalled, and this is where, you know, it's a challenge because country like Malaysia, we need to actually export our products, and to export our products, we need to have also preferential rates that are competitive, because with lower tariff rates, they would actually help reduce costs to our exporters and our industry to actually export their goods, and likewise to also get imports that is needed in the products that they use, especially for our manufacturing sector. Okay, next slide, please. So basically, on this slide here, it shows the FTAs that we have embarked on. And we have currently six FTAs, or what we call them ASEAN +1 FTAs. So the first one was actually with Australia and New Zealand FTA. So we have had it since 2006. So it's been more than a decade. And then recently, I think all of you have heard that we signed the RCEP agreement. So this RCEP agreement is actually an amalgamation of all the ASEAN +1 FTAs except for Hong Kong. So the RCEP agreement happens to be an agreement that we are trying to actually ratify currently. And I think by 1st January 2022, it will come into force. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is just to give a snapshot of how big this RCEP is. So it will cover 1/3 of the world's population and 1/3 of trade. So this is a huge number, huge opportunity. And this is something that we hope that Malaysia, especially our stakeholders, our private sector, our industry would actually capitalize on. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a snapshot of the ASEAN Free Trade Agreements, the ASEAN +1. So this is, as you can see, we actually have an older free trade agreement, which is AFTA. So this ASEAN Free Trade Agreement is actually only for ASEAN countries. So we had it since 1993, and it talks only about liberalization of goods. So the rest, where you see ASEAN China, ASEAN Korea, ASEAN Japan, ASEAN India, ASEAN Australia, New Zealand, and ASEAN Hong Kong, you can see that the dates where they've entered into force, and these are agreements that we have actually signed and implement. Some of them are more than 10 years old. So we are trying to see whether we want to actually review and to modernize these agreements, taking into account, the various lemons that are now heading our way. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is just to give you a snapshot of the MRAs, but I think, sorry, next slide, please. I think the speakers before me had actually pointed this out. So I just wanted to say here that these MRAs are specifically under the economic pillar. So these are, as you can see, engineering services is the oldest, 2005. And may I highlight here that most of these MRAs were actually pursued by Malaysia, especially the engineering. So the engineering services, our board of engineers, they actually came together and they actually tabled a paper in ASEAN, and they were successful in actually getting support from all ASEAN countries to actually have this MRA. So currently we only have about 7. And under the pipeline, we don't have any new MRAs. It's because, to be honest, I was also hearing on there is also interest to have an MRA on librarians. So since this follows under the social cultural pillar, so this is something that MITI is not aware of, but we would like to just share some of the experiences under the economic pillar, especially these 7 MRAs on the journey towards having an MRA. Next slide, please. So basically, the whole idea of this MRA is to ensure mobility among ASEAN countries, so that, one of us, could always work in Thailand or Vietnam, Singapore, vice versa. But apparently, what we found out, because there was a study done recently by AREA, the utilization, even though we had some of the MRAs since 2005, there has been a very, very, very low level of utilization. So I think it always boils down to the qualification, and also because of language, because apparently countries like Thailand, Indonesia, they impose language tests, and the tests that are in their mother tongue. So I think that would be a challenge actually. But this is something that is not easy for us to actually request them to remove, because this is their sovereign right actually to do it. But in the case of Malaysia, for example, it's easier for a Singaporean or a Thai engineer to come into Malaysia because the examination done is in English. So at the end of the day, this is something that the engineers are trying to actually fight for, to ensure that, the MRAs that have been established for quite some time would be utilized in future. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is just the history of how it all started on doing MRAs. It all started when they had this MRA signed in 2002. So this is with regards to the goods. So the goods, like a lot of countries impose their own standards. We have our CIRIM. So within ASEAN, we had different standards for goods, for electronics and electronic equipment. So that is what inspired the group of engineers to have this MRA for goods. And then from there on, they worked towards having an MRA for professionals. So can you imagine, they've actually started the journey since 2000 actually for the MRA, but it only came into effect 2005. So they had fought long and hard to have an MRA, because I think some of the countries too did not see the necessity of having an MRA. And then I just put there that because we went through the documents, so at this juncture under the economic pillar, we don't have any requests with regards to having a library MRA, but as I was informed earlier, under the social cultural pillar, there is actually an aspiration by Philippines to actually pursue for one. Okay, next please. Okay, I just wanted to highlight that even though librarians are not really parked under our economic pillar, but I also wanted to highlight to all of you that we have this ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, which is short form for AFA. So basically, this actually regulates and disciplines trade and services, which talks about, ensuring market access for ASEAN services providers or services suppliers. So basically, we have 4 modes, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in this case, the librarians, you would fall under mode 4, which is actually the mobility of people. So this is where, for us, under AFAS, we talk about reducing whatever barriers there is with regards to Mode 4. Next slide, please. Okay, and then come 2012, we actually have a specific agreement that talks about movement of natural person, which covers the mobility of Mode 4. So basically what this agreement does is to ensure that, you know, if there are professionals or highly skilled workers or specialists within ASEAN, they could actually work in each other's markets. But I would also like to put a dog ear here, because it's not about, you know, free for all, because it is based on commitments made by each country. So if you go to the website, ASEAN website, we actually have the list of commitments made by each country of what sort of Mode 4 or professionals that they do allow to move within ASEAN. And again, I also want to actually allay any fears that, you know, again, this is not free for all, because even if we commit to allow countries, ASEAN countries, to work in certain professionals or categories or of technicians or specialists, they still have to fulfill all of the domestic requirements like qualifications, immigrations, etc. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this one I just wanted to show you. So currently under the Mode 4 commitments for librarians, if you could actually see on the screen, Malaysia has, well, this is not actually a commitment. It just says unbound. So if I may explain, unbound basically says that you can come in if I feel that I want you to come in, or, you know, you can stop people from coming in, librarians from coming in. And what it says, except indicated in the horizontal section, what it means is that because in our horizontal, we actually have few categories of people that are allowed to move within ASEAN. One of them is the business visitors, which is allowed to come in for about 30 to 60 days. And then we have one category, the intra-corporate transferees, which is allowed to come into the country and work for 2 years, but of course it's subject to an employment contract and also subject to our immigration laws. So the other countries that have made commitments for librarians are also Myanmar, Thailand, and the Philippines. But I must say that these are also very, very limited. Okay, next slide, please. So this is my next slide. So this is food for thought for everybody. I hope I hope that this presentation provided some, shed some light actually with regards to library services in ASEAN. With that, I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Wadrina Wan Abdul Wahab, for your presentations and the sharing about the short story on ASEAN. Okay, we go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your question in the question box in your control panel. Okay, Mrs. Wadrina, we got questions on the Q&A sections. Okay, maybe Mrs. Wadrina can answer the question on the chat section because we have a short time. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a break and we'll be back for our last paper and speaker after this advertisement. See you later. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. That was a video of a book bear, one of the services that are offered on Pustaka Negeri Sarawak. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to our last speaker for today, Mrs. Nur Zilati Izhani Zainal. She is currently a Senior Federal Counsel of International Affairs Division, Attorney General's Chambers. Mrs. Nur Zilati Izhani Zainal holds a Diploma in Administration of Judiciary and Islamic Legal Practice from National University of Malaya, and then LLB, Legal Baccalaureate, or we call it a Bachelor of Laws from National University of Malaysia, and LLM, Legal Magister, or we call it Masters of Laws in International Financial Laws from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mrs. Nur Zilati Izhani Zainal to present a paper on mutual recognition of professional qualifications for librarians in ASEAN legal perspective. Over to you, Mrs. Nur Zilati Izhani Zainal.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum and very good morning. Right, to Mr. Farhan and the rest of the speakers today, Dr. Ezan, Associate Prof. Dr. Wan, and Ms. Wadrina just now. So basically, my topic for today, let me share you my screen. Can everyone see my screens?
Yes.
Right, thank you. The topic given to me by the host this morning is the mutual recognition of professional qualifications in ASEAN legal perspective. Initially, my topic is more on AGC's role, but I think when you talk about MREs, I think the best title for my presentation is more on the legal perspective rather than the AGC's role in it. Because everyone knows when it comes to the AGC's roles, we will get involved in the discussion of the MREs and until the end of the signing of the MRE to ensure that all the paperwork are in order. So basically, my first slide for today, let me share with you, I think this one is a very nice quote pertaining to the librarian.
Juan?
Yes?
Your slide is stuck.
It's not working, is it?
Yeah. Not yet.
Not yet. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, but not in a fully full screen. Or you wanted us to share the?
Yeah, I think you can.
Yeah, we share the
slides for me.
Yeah.
Sorry for the technical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go straight away to the second slide, please. Okay, this one is a really my contents for this morning would be very simple. So I'm not going to speak much on the MRAs. It seems that everyone knows, and I think it has been highlighted by all the speakers this morning. So we go straight away to the next slide, please. Okay, I think the first thing that we need to understand is that what is recognition is. So basically recognition is a government decision that maintains regulatory authority, autonomy, as no country is forced to accept a regulation unless they choose to recognize it. And hence, when we actually consider to have MRAs on the librarian, is a policy decision. So many things need to take into consideration before you can actually agree to have MRAs on the librarian. So the second slide, the next slide, please. Okay, this recognition results from a country assenting to the equivalence, compatibility, or at least acceptability of other member states' regulatory systems. So basically, in terms of the preparation, whether it's going to be a regulatory preparation, and I think I've got one question from Dr. Zan this morning, whether we need to have our own regulation later on when we decided to adopt the MREs. Yes, I think we will talk about this later in the next slide. So next, okay, the recognition of qualifications. When we talk about recognitions of qualifications, basically there are two types. It's either full recognition or partial recognition. So when we talk about full recognition, the example that I can give is a partner countries set a qualification requirements is equivalent to its own qualification requirement. Individuals and business that hold a partner country's qualification shall be allowed to supply services without additional requirement. They can actually come in and supply the necessary services. Unlike partial recognition, a partner qualification system has common or equivalent requirement in some areas, but that unique requirements also exist in the host country's qualification system that must be met. In this case, applicant must be exempted from the common or equivalent requirement if they have already met in their home country. I think Dr. Ezan this morning, he shared some of the, the differences between and some of it is similarities in terms of the requirements. Some of the country needs permit to actually or license to become a librarian. Or some of the country like Malaysia, we don't have to. So these are the areas that we actually need to negotiate or to discuss together with the rest of the AMS, whether we can actually can consider that we are going to have later on a permit, or we need to give and take certain things from the rest of the AMS. Okay, next. And there are two ways of recognizing qualifications. I think the first one is unilateral and the second one is mutual. But the interesting thing about the mutual recognitions of qualifications, there will be two implications. I'm not going to touch about unilateral recognizing qualification, as the relevant one is basically the mutual recognizing qualification that we are talking about today. So there will be two implications when we talk about mutual qualification, recognizing qualification. The first one would be it will allow each country to retain its own experts, its own professional education and training, and the requirements that are essential to control the quality outcomes can be kept. And you have to remember, when it comes to mutual recognition, it's usually based not on the process of the achieving professionalism or professional qualification, we call it, but on the nature and quality of the outcome of the process. So I think this morning, I think one of the questions raised in the chat box, in the Q&A box, is about the lacking of the libraries in terms of the the employment opportunities for even for the domestics, whether that area needs to be considered as well when we actually decided to have the MRE on the library. Okay, the second implication that I need to share with all of you this morning is that for mutual recognition qualifications, it will encourage dialogue between the professional organization in each country in order to investigate the nature of the professional activities, the qualifications, and pre and post qualification education and trainings. So these are two implications by having this mutual recognition qualification. So next slide, please. So next slide. So basically, we're going to through again what is MREs. I'll put it very simple. Framework arrangement established in support of liberalizing and facilitating trade in services, and it's aimed to facilitate mobility of professionals, skilled labor in ASEAN. Next. So what is MRE again? Through exchange of information, MREs also work towards the adoption of best practices on standards of and qualifications. The respective authorities accept in whole or in part, is what I meant just now, the regulatory authorizations obtained in the territory of the other party or parties to the agreement in granting their own authorizations. Next. And last slide for what is MRA is to create a situation in which two countries accept the fulfillment of certain requirements in the other country as equivalent to its own requirements on a mutual and reciprocal basis. Mutual and reciprocal basis, these are the two elements that you need to look into when you negotiate to have or to consider to have the MRAs of all librarians. Next. Okay, I think the first and the third speakers basically did mention about 8 MRAs currently we have under ASEAN, and I think the last one we have is in 2014, in which I will share with you just now, because when we're going to talk about what's in the MRAs, and for the Librarian Association of Malaysia basically to consider the elements that that need to be, given attention when considering to have this MRA in the first place. Okay, first one, we do have engineering services, nursing services, architectural services, and then next. And then we have surveying qualification, dental practitioners, medical practitioners, and the next two, next one, tourism professional and accountancy services. So basically these 8 MRAs, according to, I think one of the article mentioned by Dr. Ezan this morning is on by Shintaro Hamanaka and Sufyan Juso, September 2016, they've actually categorized these 8 MRAs into 3 categories, 3 groups. The first one is highly regulated nature, nursing services, dental practitioners and medical practitioners. Second group is unregulated establishment. When it's unregulated, the MRAs decided, all the 10 members of AMS decided to establish ASEAN Common Competencies Standard for tourism professionals. And the next one is the third group for these MRAs, engineering services, architecture services, accountancy services. For these 3 MRAs, they are in between group 1 and group 2. So basically, what we have under Group 3 is a regulated sectors having some coordinated actions to facilitate mutual recognitions within supranational approach does not seem to be very impossible. So basically, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to librarian, they don't have any regulation to support. They are not regulated in any way. Any admissions through JPA or the Public Service Department themselves. So these are the things that we need to consider as one of the provision under the MRAs would be the establishment of certain body in the host countries. Next slides. Okay, before we go to these next slides, I would like to share with the rest of the participants today and to answer the question by Dr. Ezan this morning. That one of the things that you need to consider not only in Malaysia as well as the rest of the AMS, whether the relevant legislation is available in member states to support the adoption of the MRA. So these are the things that we need to look into. There will be, the process of the MRA development processes before we come back to it. But I'm not sure whether this has been considered when it was discussed in Bangkok in 2015, as mentioned by Dr. Elzan just now. So I believe since these issues has been discussed in 2015 and now it's already into 2021. By now we should be able to actually sense what should be in the MRAs, and we have those we have identified certain body in Malaysia to actually regulate these MRAs later on. So basically, these are the things that that Malaysia or the Librarian Association of Malaysia should look into. And yes, to answer Dr. Ezan question just now, yes, we might want to have one subject to policy again, because it needs to be decided by the policy people on this. But in order for you to adopt the MRA later on, if we have to have one, then we have to. Okay. I think we go to the MRA development processes. Basically, these are the process that MRA will go into. The preliminary proposal for an MRA, basically, it can be initiated by the member states or by the Asean Secretariat. Then agreement to proceed would be by consensus of the concerned working group. So this one is under social cultural pillars. There will be a working group for this matter. And the next process in the MRA development is the impact assessment. So basically, during this process, the working group will decide on the scope and method for conducting the assessment. The funding for the assessment will be identified and implementation coordinated by the working group responsible with the support of the ASEAN Secretariat. And I would like to share and to highlight certain issues also, that when you, if you want to establish agreement on the MRA itself, you need to determine the guiding principles and the objective. What actually we want, until and unless the member states agree and reach a consensus on the concept, on the scope, on the guiding principle and objective of the MRA, then only the working draft should be drafted. Or else the premature development will lead to the inefficiency of the provision of the negotiation itself, and will take longer time. So in Malaysia, what actually we want? The qualifications. We want somebody like professional librarian coming in to work in Malaysia. Only to, if you look at this, I think the screenshot by Miti just now, the PH themselves, they're actually offering a very skilled librarian. So I'm not sure, I'm not very familiar with librarian sectors or, services in Malaysia. So these are the things that we need to look into again. And to bear in mind, the principle should outline the approaches. Okay, I'm reading the Dr. Ezan Nasir, maybe that one, I will answer that one later. To be adopted and the objective be defined in terms of the direct impact on trade. So these are the things that need to be considered by the policy people. And then the next process is the confirmation of scope and objective. I explained this just now. And then the next slide would be the preparation of MRA working draft And again, the deliberation of the working draft by working group members leading to the development of a draft for member states consultation. So even before you go to this step, basically you need to actually make sure everything is in order before the working draft can be drafted accordingly. So the next slide. And then while we have the draft, then we have, definitely we have to undertake certain consultation with the stakeholders within each member state. When we talk about stakeholders, yes, again, in Malaysia, who are these people? Is it Public Service Department or is it Persatuan Pustakawan Malaysia? And perhaps they are, have, you know, certain organization that I might overlook. So the next one is development of a final working group draft and finalization. So next. Okay, this one is what usually what we have in the MRAs. So there are, I think, about basically this one I make reference to accountancy services, the latest one, the latest format. It will differ from one MRA to another, but there are certain provisions which are very standard. For example, preamble, objective, definition, scope. But the next provision on recognition, qualification, and eligibility, this one is standard, but there are certain, the contents are not. Even National Accountancy Body, it will definitely differ from one MRS to another. Next slide. Monitoring Committee, Asean Chartered Professional Accountant Coordinating Committee, mutual exemptions. So these three boxes or provisions basically specialized, drafted only for accountancy services, but it's either the new MRA on librarian, they can have the same way of drafting provision, but the content-wise definitely is going to be very different. And the provision on amendment, dispute settlement, final provision, the next final three provisions are standard provision in the MRA. So the next one. Okay, before we go to, okay, the next one would be things to ponder. So basically, if I look, I went through all the MRA, the 8 MRAs. Basically, there will be a monitoring committee. So I'm not sure for MRAs, we don't talk about the EMS, the rest of the EMS, we talk about Malaysia here. Whether we need to appoint one monitoring committee, and who will be the monitoring committee then? And then who will be the national body that will be responsible for the application and registration? And is it PhD? Is it the Librarian Association of Malaysia? So there will be a separate, totally national body to monitor, to take charge on the MRA, on librarian. So these are the things that need to be considered by the Persatuan Malaysia, because I did my research on this, and I think we don't have any other persatuan apart from the one that I mentioned, some of the speakers mentioned this morning. So in order for the Persatuan Pustakawan Malaysia to play a bigger role, I think, on the MRA on librarian, I think that would be to take up the challenges, whether they will allow to do that, then it's not whether going to have some legislation to back you up later on. So that one to be decided later. So I think that would be my last slide. Thank you very much. And I'll try to expedite my time. I think 20 minutes are not enough, but it's okay. I think I have Mr. Farhan. I think we do have questions from Dr. Azam in the chat box. Would having an MRA pave the way for the librarianship profession to be legislated? Can we have an Aec Pustakawan? This one is policy to decide. Even you don't have an MRA, if the policy decided to regulate pustakawan in Malaysia, they can do that. You don't have to wait for the MRA, right? So for policy people to decide, for AGC, we are going only to, as far as we consider, undang-undang pustakawan Malaysia or whatever you want to call it later, they will come to us later. But even without the MRA, if the policy decide to have one, they can. You don't have to do it for the MRA, because when it comes to MRA, you have to bound yourself to the MRA in order to adopt, and it's going to be a big responsibility for Malaysia. So, do we have any other questions, guys? I think I hope it will answer your question, Dr. Izan. So, yeah, back to you, Mr. Farhan. Thank you very much again for inviting AGC.
Okay, you're welcome.
This event.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Norzilati Izhanizana, for your presentations and the sharing on the keynote on mutual recognition of professional qualifications for librarians in ASEAN on legal perspective. Okay, so like we don't have any question from the audiences. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our 5th Sarawak Annual Librarian Colloquium for 2021. Thank you, everyone. I am thankful to all guests and participants to this event. Thank you once again to Dr. Noor Izan, to Associate Professor Dr. Wan, Mrs. Wadrina, Mrs. Izhani, for participating in this 5th Sarawak Annual Librarian Colloquium 2021. We appreciate you being here, and thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Sarawak Annual Librarian Colloquium 2022. I am Farhan Aini. Assalamualaikum and have a nice day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, Dr. Naizan.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Naizan.
Yeah, thank you.
Jika ilmu berdiri dadah bila berjalan